Hello everyone, and welcome back to Moonlitwest, your place for inspiring and captivating stories from around the world. Today, I'll take you to a distant, frozen land, a place where a young girl embarks on a harrowing journey of survival and discovers the true meaning of courage. This is the story of Aika and her companion, Shiro the wolf, a journey you definitely don't want to miss. Before we dive in, make yourself comfortable. Grab a warm blanket, a cup of tea if you have one, and relax as we explore this incredible tale together. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoy this story, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming adventures. Now, let's step into the world of The Long Night on Tianshan. Aika pulled her thin silk scarf tightly around her face to shield it from the biting wind that swept across the Tianshan Valley. The 19-year-old girl stood on the hilltop, her deep brown eyes gazing into the distance at the snow-covered mountains stretching endlessly toward the horizon. This was the place where she had grown up, where her life had been woven together with tales of tradition, nights spent herding sheep under the moonlight, and peaceful evenings beneath starry skies. But now, everything seemed to have been erased by the devastating snowstorm that had just passed. Aika's family was one of the oldest shepherding households in the Tianshan mountains. They lived a simple life in a traditional yurt in the valley, relying on their flock of sheep as their main source of livelihood. Every winter was harsh, but this year had been particularly unforgiving. A sudden and violent blizzard had buried the pastures under thick snow, killing most of the flock in the freezing cold. Now, fewer than 20 sheep remained, and her parents were desperately trying to figure out how to save them before their food supply ran out completely. Aika looked at the frail, shivering sheep huddled in the cold wind, her heart heavy with sorrow. Her father's eyes, once as strong and steadfast as the mountains themselves, were now clouded with worry. Her mother sat silently, gently touching the silver necklace she always wore, a family heirloom she considered a symbol of unity and hope. The tension in the small yurt was suffocating. "I'll go," Aika said, breaking the silence. Her parents turned to her, their faces filled with surprise and concern. "That's out of the question, Aika. You're a girl, and the journey is far too dangerous," her father said, his voice trembling more with fear than anger. "But we don't have any other choice. I know the path to the southern pastures. If I don't go, we'll lose everything. I can't just sit here and watch it all disappear," she replied, her voice firm. Despite her parents' attempts to dissuade her, Aika's determination was clear. She had grown up among these mountains, learning to read the signs of the weather and navigate the treacherous paths. More importantly, She knew this was her chance to prove herself, to break free from the shadow of rigid traditions that had always confined her. The next morning, Aika set out. She packed a small bag with provisions, a small knife, and her mother's silver necklace as a lucky charm. Mounted on her horse, she felt the icy wind cutting across her face. Like a blade, the snow crunched beneath her horse's hooves, and the gray sky loomed overhead, threatening another storm. The path to the southern pastures was anything but easy. Aika had to traverse narrow mountain passes, where powerful gusts of wind could easily knock both her and her horse off balance. Occasionally, she stopped to check her hand-drawn map, hoping she was still on the right track. But disaster struck. As they crossed a narrow ledge, her horse suddenly slipped on a patch of ice. Aika pulled at the reins, but it was too late. Both she and the horse plummeted into a ravine. When she awoke, every muscle in her body ached. She forced herself to sit up, her trembling hands fumbling for her bag. Luckily, she still had some provisions and her knife, but her horse was gone. Around her stretched a desolate, icy landscape, a narrow gorge blanketed in snow and lined with jagged boulders. Then she heard it, a faint, weak whimper. Turning around, Aika saw it, a small wolf pup, curled up in the snow, one of its legs badly injured. Aika hesitated. Wolves were the natural enemies of shepherds, the silent predators that came in the night to snatch away weak lambs. But this wolf was unlike anything she had heard about. It was small, frail, and its sharp golden eyes were filled with fear. "We're both trapped here," Aika whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. She didn't know why, but she found herself pulling off her scarf and gently wrapping it around the wolf's injured leg. The pup didn't resist, only whimpering softly, as if sensing her kindness. Beneath the cold, unforgiving sky of Tianshan, a girl and a young wolf began an unusual and difficult journey of survival together. Part 2. The struggle for survival. The wind howled relentlessly, carrying a chill that seeped deep into Aika's bones. She winced as she tried to lift her foot from the thick snow. The injury to her left ankle made every step an ordeal. She tried flexing her foot, but the sharp pain that shot through her forced her to sit down on a nearby rock to rest. Her gaze shifted to the small wolf pup, curled up a few steps away. It barely moved, only whimpering softly, its wild golden eyes half closed, as it looked at her with a mix of fear and helplessness. Aika sighed. Her instincts told her the wolf was too weak to pose a threat to her. Part of her wanted to leave it behind. After all, wolves were the eternal enemies of shepherds like her family. But as she looked at the tiny, vulnerable creature, Aika found herself unable to turn away. "I don't know if you can help me, but we're stuck here together," she muttered, crouching to untie her thick scarf. Cautiously, Aika approached, The wolf let out a low growl, its ears flattening against its head, as though trying to intimidate her, but its body was too weak to do much else. Aika knelt a safe distance away, extending her hand slowly to let the wolf catch her scent. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," she whispered, her voice gentle, as though calming a frightened child. After a moment's hesitation, the wolf relaxed slightly, its eyes losing some of their tension. Aika carefully wrapped her scarf around its injured leg, securing it with a simple knot, something she had learned from tending to her family's sheep. "I'll call you Shiro," she said, meeting the wolf's piercing golden gaze. "It suits you." Shiro didn't respond, but it didn't resist either. That was a good sign. The snow continued to fall, the cold wind growing fiercer. Aika knew she had to find shelter before night fell. She scanned the area and spotted a small overhang of rock that could provide some protection from the wind. She set up a makeshift tent, using a large piece of fabric salvaged from her pack, creating a small space just big enough for herself and Shiro. The wolf curled up in a corner, its eyes closed, its breathing shallow. Aika felt the gnawing hunger in her stomach. Her pack held only a small piece of dry bread, barely enough to last another day. Looking at Shiro, she guessed it was hungry too, tearing off a small piece of bread. She held it out cautiously near Shiro's snout. At first, the wolf hesitated, but eventually, survival instincts took over, and it gingerly took the bread from her hand. "We don't have much left, Shiro. You need to get better, so you can help me," she said, her voice tinged with fatigue. In the days that followed, Aika and Shiro began to rely on each other to survive. Aika discovered that Shiro wasn't just a weak wolf pup. It was intelligent and perceptive. Each morning, when the wind was calmer, Shiro would lift its head and sniff the air, as if searching for something. At first, Aika didn't understand, but she soon realized that Shiro was leading her toward signs of life, patches of grass, sources of water, or even small prey. One afternoon, Shiro let out a low whimper, its tail wagging slightly as it looked toward a specific direction. Following it, Aika soon found a small frozen stream breaking through the thin layer of ice. She eagerly gathered water, grateful for her unlikely companion. Gradually, Aika stopped seeing Shiro as an enemy. In its eyes, she saw resilience, a fierce determination to keep going, no matter how difficult the path. "You're like me, Shiro," Aika said with a faint smile, gently stroking the soft fur on its back. "We're both just trying to find a way out of here." Under the cold, relentless sky, amidst the unforgiving winds, a girl and a wolf formed an extraordinary bond, a silent partnership that carried them forward. Survival and exploration. Aika began by building a better shelter, Nearby, she spotted the half-buried body of her horse under the snow. Despite the pang of sadness, she knew she had to make use of every part of it. Taking her small knife, Aika carefully stripped the horse's hide, turning it into a makeshift insulating cover and part of a sturdier tent. With skills passed down from her parents, Aika lashed together wooden branches to create a basic tent frame. She used strips of sheep leather to tie everything securely, crafting a small but sturdy space where she and Shiro could take refuge from the biting snowstorm. "You've got to pull your weight too," Aika muttered, glancing at Shiro as he lay motionless, his golden eyes following her every move. Once the tent was finished, Aika decided to search for food. Shiro, now partially recovered, seemed strong enough to follow her. Initially, she was unsure about bringing him along, but he quickly proved to be sharper than she had anticipated as they carefully traversed a narrow mountain path. Shiro suddenly stopped, sniffing the air, before looking intently in one direction. Curious, Aika followed his lead and soon found a small group of rabbits nibbling on grass near a patch of shrubs. "Let's see if you're any good at hunting," Aika whispered, a sly glint in her eye as she looked at Shiro. Without hesitation, Shiro darted forward. Despite his young age, his predatory instincts amazed Aika. Moments later, he returned with a small rabbit in his jaws, his tail wagging slightly, as if proudly showing off his catch. Relief washed over Aika. She quickly gathered some dry branches and flint stones she had collected earlier, skillfully starting a small fire, something she had mastered during her many nights herding sheep with her family. In this rare moment of reprieve, Aika and Shiro shared their hard-won prize, a warm meal in the freezing wilderness, a new challenge. But survival in the wilderness was far from easy. One evening, as Aika sat inside her tent, she heard distant howls echoing through the valley. These were not the lone cries of a single wolf. They were the coordinated calls of an entire pack. Shiro lifted his head, his ears pricked, and his body tensed. Aika immediately understood the danger. This was the territory of a wolf pack, and Shiro might very well be their target. Her father's stories flashed through her mind, tales of wolf packs, hunting down stray or exiled members. Shiro, with his once injured leg, must have been part of this pack at some point. Over the following days, the wolves' presence became more evident. Tracks appeared in the snow near her camp, and their howls grew louder each night, reverberating through the icy peaks. Aika felt the pressure mounting. Shiro, too, seemed uneasy, his golden eyes flickering with a mix of fear and uncertainty. "Do you belong with them?" Aika asked softly, her voice tinged with sadness. Shiro looked at her, but of course, there was no answer. Aika found herself wrestling with a difficult decision. Should she keep Shiro by her side to ensure her own survival, or let him return to his pack? Part of her wanted to hold on to Shiro, not just because of his help, but because he had become an integral part of her lonely existence in the mountains. Yet she knew that the pack might be Shiro's only chance for long-term survival, and she couldn't selfishly keep him from them. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the distant cries of the wolves. Inside her heart, Aika's struggle between emotion and logic raged just as fiercely. Climactic confrontation facing the pack. The night on Tianshan was bitterly cold and eerily quiet, broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the crevices and the faint glow of the moon illuminating the snow. Aika sat huddled in her small tent, the weak flames of the fire flickering in front of her. Shiro lay beside her, his ears alert and his sharp golden eyes fixed on the darkness outside. For days, the howls of the pack had become a familiar soundtrack to her nights, but tonight they were closer, far closer than ever before. There was no doubt in her mind. They had found her, and Shiro, a guttural growl, shattered the stillness of the night, sending a chill down Aika's spine. Her hand instinctively gripped the small knife in her lap, her palms clammy with cold sweat. She glanced at Shiro, whose body had gone taut with tension. "They're here," she whispered, as if speaking to herself. The wolf pack appears. From the darkness, glowing eyes gradually emerged, glinting in the flickering firelight. Aika counted at least 7 wolves, their massive bodies covered in thick, bristling fur that made them look even more formidable. They moved slowly, circling her tent, their low growls a clear warning. Aika knew the pack wasn't here for her. They had come for Shiro, the stray wolf, perhaps abandoned or punished by them. But now, with Shiro sheltered inside her tent, the wolves seemed to perceive her as a threat. Shiro stepped forward, letting out a low growl in response. Aika could see the conflict in him. Part of Shiro wanted to run toward the pack, but another, deeper part chose to stay with her. "No, Shiro," she said, her voice trembling, yet resolute. "I won't let them take you." Aika protects Shiro. Aika tightened her grip on the small knife in her hand, the icy blade pressed against her palm, slick with sweat. Around her, the growls of the wolves grew louder, like the relentless beating of war drums, heralding an inevitable attack. Their sharp eyes gleamed in the firelight, one by one, creeping closer, tightening the circle that threatened to engulf her and Shiro. The fire in front of her was dying, reduced to faint, flickering flames that barely illuminated the frigid expanse around them. Aika understood that the fire was the only thing standing between life and death. I can't let it go out, she thought, her heart pounding so hard it nearly drowned out the wolves' growls. She crouched quickly, her trembling hands gathering the last remnants of dry branches from beneath the snow and tossing them into the fire. For a brief moment, the flames roared to life, their sudden brightness forcing a few of the wolves to hesitate and step back. But the reprieve was short-lived. The hungry golden eyes returned, glowing even fiercer in the darkness. "Go away," Aika shouted, her voice echoing through the mountains, though she could hear the quiver in her tone. She picked up a burning branch, brandishing it in front of the nearest wolves. They flinched to the side, but their menacing stares didn't waver. Suddenly, a massive wolf stepped forward, easily twice the size of Shiro, its thick fur bristling like a small mountain, its eyes locked onto Aika's, and every step it took radiated power and intimidation. Aika felt her breath hitch. Her legs seemed frozen in place, but her mind raced. Run? No. She knew she had no chance. Stand still? That would only invite the inevitable. "Shiro," she whispered, glancing at the small wolf by her side. Shiro faces the pack. Without warning, Shiro darted out of the tent. "Shiro, come back!" Aika shouted, her voice breaking with fear. But Shiro didn't listen. With a thunderous growl, he charged straight at the pack's leader. Aika froze, her eyes wide, as she took in the scene. Shiro, small yet fearless, stood his ground against the wolf towering over him. He growled again, louder this time, a sound so fierce it momentarily stopped the pack in their tracks. The leader bared its teeth, growling back with equal ferocity. Yet instead of attacking, it took a cautious step back, its eyes narrowing in what seemed to be wary assessment. Aika couldn't believe what she was witnessing. The pack, poised for an attack, suddenly hesitated. Their collective gaze shifted toward Shiro, filled with confusion, as if they couldn't comprehend how such a small lone wolf dared to challenge their leader. But Shiro didn't falter. He took another step forward, his small body tense, his fur bristling, and his golden eyes blazing. In the night, time seemed to stand still. The pack remained motionless, as though the entire mountain held its breath. Only the wind howled through the crevices, accompanied by Aika's shaky breathing. Then, as if receiving an unspoken signal, the leader lowered its body slightly, its piercing gaze softening. It stared at Shiro for a long moment before turning away, leading the pack back into the shadows. Aika didn't dare move, standing frozen until the silhouettes of the wolves disappeared entirely into the darkness. Shiro remained where he was, his breaths labored and his legs trembling. Slowly, he turned back to Aika, his golden eyes meeting hers as if to ensure she was safe. Finally, unable to hold himself up any longer, he collapsed. "Shiro," Aika cried, rushing to his side. She cradled his small body, tears streaming down her face. "You're absolutely insane," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and relief. Shiro didn't respond, but his eyes still burned brightly. In them, Aika saw not only the strength of a small wolf, but also an unshakable will to survive and a loyalty that ran deeper than she could fathom. "You're a warrior, Shiro. Thank you," she murmured, her tears falling onto his fur. The valley of lush grass. When they finally reached the top of the slope, Aika froze. Spread out before her was a breathtaking sight. A vast valley, blanketed in lush green grass, stretching endlessly under the golden sunlight. She stood motionless, speechless. This scene was like a dream, a sanctuary, amidst the harsh, freezing days she had endured. Shiro turned to look at her, his tail wagging slightly. It was as if he had known about this place all along. "Did you lead me here?" Aika asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Shiro stood silently, like a quiet guide who had fulfilled his purpose. The unavoidable farewell. Aika knew in her heart that this valley was the answer to her family's struggles. It was a perfect refuge for the remaining sheep, a place sheltered from the snowstorms, abundant with grass and warmed by the sun. But she also knew another truth. Shiro couldn't come back to the village with her. The villagers would never accept a wolf, the natural enemy of their way of life, into their midst. Even if Aika tried to protect Shiro, he could never live as a tame animal, bound by human constraints. Sitting down, she gently stroked Shiro's soft fur. "You know we have to part ways, don't you?" she said, her voice heavy with sadness. Shiro looked at her, his golden eyes unwavering, never leaving hers. Aika untied the old scarf she had once used to bandage his injured leg. With great care, she wrapped it around Shiro's neck, a final gesture of gratitude and farewell. "You saved my life, more times than I can count. I'll never forget you." "Shiro," she whispered. Shiro leaned his head into her hand, as if acknowledging her words. The journey home a new hope. Aika stood, taking one last look at Shiro before turning to leave. Each step away felt like a weight pressing on her heart, but she carried with her an unshakable belief that Shiro would thrive in the wilderness, a place where he truly belonged. On her journey back to the village, Aika felt a newfound strength within herself. She was no longer the timid girl, bound by the limitations of tradition. Her journey with Shiro had taught her how to face challenges, to trust herself, and to value the deep connections that transcend the boundaries between humans and nature. When she finally returned to the village, Aika shared the news of the lush valley with her parents, their faces lit up with a mix of surprise and pride. The very next day, they began moving their surviving sheep to the new land, homecoming and recognition. The long journey finally brought Aika back to her familiar valley, where her small village nestled beneath the towering peaks of Tianshan. The cold winds still swept through the village, but this time, Aika's heart was filled with a sense of peace and determination. Her family's remaining sheep, weakened and weary from the harsh winter, were quickly herded to the valley Shiro had led her to. When her parents saw the flock grazing on the verdant grass, their eyes filled with astonishment and gratitude. "Aika, you really did it," her father said, his voice brimming with pride. News of Aika's extraordinary journey quickly spread through the village. People came to marvel at her courage and resilience, astonished not only by her discovery of the valley, but also by the strength she had shown in surviving such perilous conditions. The story of a young girl braving the unforgiving mountains, facing down a wolf pack, and finding salvation for her family captured the imagination of everyone who heard it. To the villagers, Aika was no longer just an ordinary girl. She became a symbol of perseverance and the ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges. Yet, even with all the recognition, Aika carried a quiet longing in her heart, an irreplaceable void. On quiet nights, as Aika sat alone by the fire, her thoughts often drifted back to Shiro. She remembered his sharp golden eyes, the moments they fought together against the biting cold, and his unwavering bravery when he stood between her and the wolf pack. Aika knew that Shiro was no longer by her side, but he had never truly left her. His image remained etched in her mind, a lasting symbol of courage, freedom, and an indomitable will to survive. "You're still here, Shiro," she whispered, her hand instinctively touching the old scarf she had once wrapped around his neck, passing down the lessons. Years later, as another winter swept through the village, Aika often found herself sitting by the fire with the village children gathered around her. Their wide eyes glistened with curiosity as they listened intently to her story. And in those days, Shiro guided me through the mountains. He wasn't just a wolf, he was a companion, a light in the darkness, Aika said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. One child, unable to contain their curiosity, asked, "Did Shiro really exist, Aika? Or was he just a dream you made up to survive?" Aika smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward the snow-covered peaks in the distance. "That doesn't matter," she replied. "What matters is that Shiro taught me to believe in myself and face every challenge head on, whether he was real or a part of my mind. He changed me forever. The children sat in silence, their faces filled with wonder at the story's magic. Outside, the mountain winds howled, but inside the small yurt, the firelight flickered on Aika's face, reflecting the courage and lessons she had carried back from the harsh wilderness of Tianshan. The question of Shiro and courage. The story ends with Aika gazing toward the distant peaks, where she once fought for survival alongside Shiro. Her eyes glimmered, not with the firelight, but with a profound belief in life itself. To the villagers, Shiro was just a wolf, a strange creature Aika encountered on her journey. But to Aika, he was much more, a symbol of freedom, courage, and the strength to push beyond one's limits. Did Shiro truly exist? Or was he a creation of Aika's mind? That question is left for each listener to answer for themselves. And it is this unanswered mystery that transforms Aika's journey into a legend, and that concludes the incredible journey of the long night on Tianshan. Aika and Shiro's story is one of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond that can form between two unlikely companions. Through their challenges and sacrifices, they taught us about trust, freedom, and the strength to face the unknown. If you've enjoyed this tale, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these adventures alive. As always, take care, stay cozy, and let the lessons from Aika and Shiro remind you to face life's challenges with bravery and heart. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, sweet dreams, and I'll see you again soon on Moonlitwest. Good night, everyone.